Mr. President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reserving the right to object, I would like to offer an additional piece of legislation that I think would be very appropriate to include in the proposal. I asked today for consideration of the Wounded Knee Massacre Memorial and Sacred Site Act, that is H.R. 3371-S2088. This would place 40 acres of tribally purchased land at the massacre site into restricted fee status. See, both the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe hold a very deep connection to this event. This is the Wounded Knee Massacre site. There were relatives coming from the Cheyenne River Tribe down to winter near Pine Ridge. That's where this event occurred, and it's one of the most terrible events in the history of the United States, where Native Americans were killed and they were left to freeze in a snowstorm. As you all know, the Wounded Knee Massacre not only represents a low point in the U.S.-Lakota relations, but it also serves as truly one of the darkest moments in our nation's history. To date, the Wounded Knee Massacre grounds remain a symbolic site, with tribal members regularly visiting the area to honor the deceased. In 2022, both tribes purchased the 40 acres from a private owner in an effort to preserve the land. Shortly after the purchase, both tribes signed a covenant holding that the property shall be held and maintained as a memorial and sacred site without any other development. This legislation, which simply places the 40 acres into restricted fee status, will help preserve the site for future tribal generations. As we approach the 134th anniversary next month of the Wounded Knee Massacre, it is my hope that we can come together to acknowledge this event and work to mend our history through reconciliation and mutual respect. Although we can't rewrite the past, the Wounded Knee Massacre Memorial and Sacred Site Act is one way to show healing and progress. This legislation easily passed the House and has languished in the United States Senate for months. Passing this legislation during Native American Heritage Month is of great importance to Wounded Knee descendants from my home state. Look, this is one of those areas where you have two tribes that lost members and their relatives are still there. They still honor that site. And I agree that the other pieces of legislation that are here in front of us, I think are good, and I think they represent some of the best work of the United States, where you set aside differences, you come together and you pass good legislation. I believe this legislation fits that particular sect as well. And so with that, I would simply ask that I would ask the senator that he would modify this request to include H.R. 3371, the Wounded Knee Massacre Memorial and Sacred Site Act.
Is there objection to the modification? The senator from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. Reserving the right to object, I want to make this very clear to the members of the Oglala Sioux Tribe and the Cheyenne River Tribe. This is not about you. As a matter of fact, I know you've been seeking this it's been 100 years since the event they memorialized, and you've been seeking this for quite some time. But you need to know that your leadership is playing a game that will ultimately force me to take a position on the modification. I believe that the Wounded Knee Massacre Memorial is at a sacred site, and the act really does need to come into law, just not yet. The reason is I've got an issue with their tribal leadership. I've got an issue with the Sioux's leadership going after the Lumbee tribe in eastern North Carolina. The Lumbee have been trying to seek recognition for years, and there's a long and sordid trail of racism, the Jim Crow era, and things that I will not talk about today, but I will in the coming weeks. As many of my colleagues know, I've been working on the Lumbee Fairness Act getting it passed into law for quite some time. I acknowledge some, I'm going to go quicker on this. I'm going to submit some for the record, if I may. Mr. President, the bottom line is I'm not going to get into the history of the Lumbee tribe. What I'm going to do is get into the history of the casino cartel that is trying to prevent the Lumbee tribe from being recognized. First among them is the largest Indian tribe east of the Mississippi River. It's the Eastern Band of the Cherokee in North Carolina. These are my constituents. They're the same constituents where then Speaker Tom Tillis made sure they were treated fairly, renegotiated their compact, and it was transformational to them as a Republican leader over the objections of a majority of my Republican members. That's the only bill that I allowed to do in my 4 years as Speaker to do the right thing for the Cherokee. My reward was to have them use some of the treasure that was gained from my support in the State House to pay lobbyists huge sums of money to discredit the application for recognition of the Lumbee Indians. Now I want to get into some specifics. For years, the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Indians and their advisor, Wilson Pipestem, had led the efforts, the punitive efforts, directly against the Lumbee tribe. Most recently, at the 81st NCAI Convention, a few weeks ago, UINO, sorry for these abbreviations, spread inflammatory information about the Lumbee tribe. That was on November the 1st. The Eastern Band publicly thanked the UINO for the distribution of these materials. They were false. Since this stunt, the NCAI president has publicly condemned the distribution of those materials and issued an apology for the Lumbee tribe. Now I've been made aware that the Eastern Band, William Pipestem, UINO have been hosting events on Capitol Hill, spending large sums of money to continue spreading those lies. In the coming weeks and months, I'm going to continue to highlight the individuals, the lobbyists, the tribal leaders, and the groups that are part of this web that are preventing the Lumbee from getting the recognition that they have deserved for nearly 130 years. I want to reiterate to the Oglala Sioux and to the Cheyenne River Sioux, this is not about you. This is about your leaders, and this is about their underhanded, unfair treatment of a tribal nation that deserves recognition and that this country needs to atone for over a century of racism and neglect. And for that reason, Mr. Chair, I do object to the modification.
The objection to the modification is heard.
Mr. President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. President. Look, I am very disappointed in my friend from North Carolina's approach to this particular issue. As members of the Senate, we each have a vote as to whether or not we will support different pieces of legislation. I had chosen not to object to his legislation, which he has been speaking about, and we have done our best to try to allay any concerns that he may have about our future attempts to disrupt his approach. So it's very disappointing that he would hold as hostage this particular piece of legislation, which is of solid intent to help repair relations between the Oglala Lakota, the Cheyenne River Sioux tribes, and the government of the United States in a way which does not impact his tribe or the challenges that he has with getting his tribe recognized whatsoever. In fact, we had felt that by not objecting at this point, and we have not, that he would understand how serious we were about trying to get our piece of legislation attached to this to fix the problem. As an example today, and to the chairman of the committee who has worked so hard to bring these forward along with the ranking member, I have no intentions of standing in the way of them passing their solid legislation simply as a protest vote. I think we have to move forward and take the best that we can. I will continue to try to work with the member from North Carolina to assure him that if he will allow this piece of legislation to move forward, we would not be objecting to his legislation in the future. But if we can't have ours, I guess there's always the possibility that he will not be able to get his as well. And with that, I will not object to the original proposal.
Mr. President.
Senator from North Carolina.
Senator Rounds, I call him Mike, and I are good friends. We came into the legislature, we came into the Senate together in 2014. We got to know each other before we even got here. He is a man of honor, and he's a man of his word. And I have no doubt that he would stand in the way should I allow this measure to go forward today. The problem is the tribes that he represents will. They will continue to work to spread the misinformation, to smear a tribe that deserves recognition, and they want the respect that they have been entitled to for over 130 years when they first got recognition, short of federal recognition. So if I had a Senate and a Congress, if I had 535 Mike Rounds, I would not have objected to this today. If I had tribal leaders who were not lying to constituents and misinforming them on the background of the Lumbee tribe and knowing that they will continue to, I have no other option than what I did today, and it gives me no pleasure to do it to one of my favorite people in the U.S. Senate.